The development of technology may draw upon many fields of knowledge to achieve some practical result. It is mainly about testing or adapting research and practices. One such example of technology development has been demonstrated by a group of private cotton and sugar consultants who have been involved in a trial looking at the capacity of private service providers to engage with digital agriculture. This trial has been a collaboration between a number of agricultural industries, in particular Sugar Research Australia and the Cotton Research and Development Corporation. The team steering the trial was made up of a research lead, representatives from the sugar and the cotton industry, as well as a project officer who coordinated and facilitated the activities within the trial. The trial team's first question was, what are the major issues associated with the delivery of digital agricultural services for the private service providers? It was decided that the best way to find this out was to bring a representative group of people together for a one-day facilitated scoping workshop to dig out these major issues. This group was called the Focus Group. The group consisted of crop consultants and advisors, precision agricultural service providers, researchers and industry personnel. The aim of the workshop was to identify key areas of interest and need for farm service advisors to build their capacity to use digital agriculture as part of their advisory services to farm clients. Using the ORID framework as a process to facilitate the questions, the scoping workshop was broken down into 4 facilitated sessions. The first session was an introduction to the project and an opportunity for the participants to get to know each other. The second session consisted of a brain dump where participants were asked to identify what their current level of engagement with digital agriculture is. This was done by asking the following 2 questions and getting people to write down answers on sticky notes and putting them up on the wall. Participants were then asked to work in groups to discuss and come up with a list of gaps and opportunities with the use of digital ag technology by private service providers. The result was a comprehensive list of priority issues. These issues were then clumped into groups and participants were asked to vote on what are the 2 most important issues for progressing the engagement of the private sector with digital agriculture. Finally, the top 3 priority issues were identified by the participants voting on which ones would have the biggest impact on their businesses. The number 1 issue identified was how to work out and demonstrate the value proposition of the digital technology. In other words, the technology looks great, but is it going to work in my business for my customers? The trial team met again and discussed the outcomes from the scoping meeting. They suggested the best way to address the issue of working out the value proposition of digital technology was to build an evaluation framework that facilitated a private service provider to assess a digital technology or service. Rather than the trial team just build the framework, it was decided to put together a review panel, which was made up of cotton and sugar private consultants, with the aim to build a framework from the ground up.
My name's Jim O'Connor and my business is Border Rivers Consulting, based in Gundawindi, and I provide agronomic farm services for my irrigated and dryland cotton farmers.
I'm Carissa Rickson. I work for Trap Services, which is myself and my husband, as a private company doing consulting.
My name's Belinda Chase. I'm an agronomist for Dalby Rural Supplies in Dalby.
I'm Lawrence DeBella. I'm the manager of Herbicane Productivity Services Limited in Ingham.
G'day, my name's John Markley. I'm from a company called Pharmacist. We're an agronomic service provider for the predominantly sugar industry, based in Mackay and the Burlington.
These review panel members were joined by industry personnel for a facilitated 2-day workshop to build an evaluation framework and to design individual case studies that on from the workshop would be used to test the framework. To build the framework, the panel firstly needed to establish the building blocks for the framework. This was done by again using the ORID process to find out what these building blocks were. Firstly, we gathered everyone's ideas and thoughts around what digital tools and services they had thought would be good to add to their business. Secondly, we got everyone to consider the objectives and in pairs discuss why are these tools and services important to your business. The third step, and often the hardest step, is about getting everyone to question, what does this mean for me? We got everyone to individually write down what are the main things you need to consider when adding these services to your business. Finally, to make some decisions, we worked with all the responses and clumped them into similar themes to come up with the basic building blocks of the framework. All up, there were 8 building blocks identified during the process. The group then went on and filled in details under each of these building blocks, and finally the matrix around questions in the building block. A draft framework was produced. To test the robustness of the process, each individual panel member came up with a case study to test the evaluation framework. A couple of examples of these case studies are as follows.
So my case study was to evaluate the feasibility of using drones to do weed inspections in paddocks for us, given that we're probably going to lose the ability to use our four-wheeler motorbikes in the future.
Our case study was looking at developing a soil mapping system for our region. We've got a lot of sodic soils, magnesic soils, and we wanted to drive precision agriculture. So we were quite keen to look at buying some soil mapping equipment. The board posed the question, well, what's the return on investment? What are we going to get from this productivity-wise, etc.? So what we've done is we've actually gone through and developed a whole business case, presented that to the board for consideration, and we've then purchased the unit and we're now doing it.
How have you found the approach of the project to work through the issues of using digital technologies in your business?
Yeah, I found being involved in the project really valuable for getting my ideas together and getting them in a structure that enabled me to actually implement them, as opposed to just thinking about them and not really acting on them. So I think the project's approach has really allowed me to get some structure to what originally was just an idea, and gave me the encouragement and the impetus to actually act out on it and implement it with some farmers, which is what we've been able to do.
I found the project to be very, very good to develop the framework, very interactive and very inclusive of everyone's ideas. And I think by using that, the approaches that we're using, the jam sessions and brainstorming sessions with all the people, I think that's developed a really good outcome.
Carissa, how has the framework assisted you to work through the feasibility of your case study?
The frameworks from this project has allowed me to look at not just the cost analysis that we all look at when we're doing any sort of thing in business, but also the legal ramifications, the information around IP and who owns IP, where to go to get more information to source this information and evaluate it a bit more rigorously. We all tend to do just the cost, but what's the other things behind it? For me, it could be staff savings, time savings. So it may not necessarily be a cost that I can pass on to the person, onto my customers, but it's a time saving within my business, which allows me to service more customers. So therefore, it returns it that way.
I really enjoyed the project. The issues that were raised were prevalent and they were realistic. people that were involved in the project from other industries or other ag industries were good people to work with. It was good to share knowledge amongst those other users. So they're from outside the sugar industry. So they have different issues and different problem solving. So it was good to talk to them and work through some of the issues that we were facing. The people who run it, Viv and the others, were exceptional, and I found the whole process really enjoyable.
The evaluation framework has been very handy, very useful for us to sort of work through the case study just by cutting out a lot of the emotion involved, and because a lot of these decisions are based on feel and emotion, and bringing it back down to nuts and bolts, dollars and cents feasibility for the project. So by just simply working through that framework, it's been able to identify whether the project is going to be useful for our business or our clients, and to how much. So it sort of brings it back to a purely economic and cost benefit decision, more than an emotive fuel than a feel good sort of decision process.
This trial has suggested that a facilitated collaborative approach to focus on an identified issue can achieve very practical outcomes. By involving the target audience from the beginning of the process and facilitating their ideas and concerns into a structured decision-making process has enabled technology development by focusing on capacity building for change.